Welcome back to The Heat. We're talking about Turkish President Erdogan and his recent flurry of international trips that has taken him to Russia, India, China and the United States. We're looking at what's behind these diplomatic efforts. Let's go to Ali in our newsroom. Ali, let's talk about the conflict in Syria and the fight against ISIL. Can the United States and Turkey work together, notwithstanding their differences over the YPG?
In the long term, yes, they will. Actually, I always point out that US, Pentagon, and the Turkish army should coordinate better, because it's not a problem with Trump or the previous administration with President Obama. The US army is insisting to use PYD fighting against Daesh. So I think if there is a much better, stronger coordination between Pentagon and Turkish army, we'll see better results. And also, what we are seeing also, there will be a much stronger intelligence sharing between two countries. And in the long term, I believe that there will be a much better, stronger coordination fighting against ISIS. And I just want to highlight that there are over 60 anti-ISIS coalition members right now fighting against ISIS. And nobody is questioning why these 67 countries cannot beat ISIS, defeat ISIS, but only one Kurdish group is used for, fighting against ISIS. So there are many questions that Turkey is bringing up on the table, that there might be a different strategy to defeat ISIS.
Aykan, do you agree with that assessment that there needs to be more coordination between the Turkish military and the Pentagon?
No, certainly, but I don't see it likely, because what we're seeing is that US and Turkey are drifting apart politically, from the security point of view, and this drifting apart is paralleled by Turkey's pivoting away from the European Union, as Turkey's European Union process is also on life support as we speak. Moreover, this is compounded by the problem that now at the Council of Europe level, Turkey is back under political monitoring. So Turkey is also on life support at the Council of Europe level. So I think we will see that Turkey will consciously pivot further toward Russia, China, India, as Erdogan will look for alternatives, because he knows that an authoritarian regime is not welcome in the EU, it's not welcome in the NATO, so he needs to substitute this vacuum with something else, because we have to remember that since Turkey became a candidate country for the European Union, a vast percentage of, the bulk of Turkey's foreign direct investment came from the West. And this is what I call the democracy dividend. Turkey was democratizing, right, and it had a very big payoff. But now that Turkey is turning its face away from democracy, Turkey needs new FDI. Turkey needs new sources of investment that will be less concerned about human rights and democracy and media freedoms.
Joshua, as Turkey reassesses its place in the world, is it turning east or is it looking for more balance?
This is the perennial question. I think in Washington, every 5 years we go through a crisis of, did we lose Turkey? Which direction is Turkey going? Turkey has always been there. It's always had one foot in Asia and one foot in Europe. I think that this broader discussion is not just about Turkey. It's about the global environment. The global environment has shifted. No one a year ago would have predicted that President Trump and kind of this wave of populism that is sweeping all over the West, not just in the United States, would affect everyone. Turkey might have been on the front end of this. And I think that Turkey, to Aykan's point, if you look at the most recent visit of President Erdogan, he's looking for options. And, a year ago, it looked like Russia and Turkey might be on the verge of war. The Turks shot down a Russian airplane, which hadn't happened since the Cold War. Now they're working very closely together. President Erdogan came directly from Beijing to Washington. What bigger symbolism can you possibly have than coming from the rising power where Turkey's looking to try to figure out, can it be part of the One Belt, One Road strategy? Can it be a critical member, to its critical NATO ally, and try to figure out what deal can I get? And to the point of transactionalism, I think the U.S.-Turkey relationship needs to be reinvigorated at all levels. And I think in Washington, we need to figure out, do we have a Turkey strategy moving forward? And what does that look like? It can't just be military to military. It needs to be an all of the above approach.
And do you see that coming?
Unfortunately, not in the short term. I think right now we're so focused on special counsels and Russian leaks that Turkey, unfortunately, is at a much lower level in terms of priority than Washington is on the Turkish agenda.
Right. Ali, the Turkish president also recently met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Sochi. Russia and Turkey, of course, playing a key role in the fight against ISIL in Syria. How important is the Putin-Erdogan relationship in advancing peace efforts in Syria?
It's very important. I mean, Russia right now has an air base in Syria, and they are getting more stronger in the region since U.S. side kind of like didn't have a strategic direction in Syria for a while. I just want to remind that Russia and Turkey has a strong trade value. The relationship is more on the trade side, since it's also close, like a neighborhood between two countries. If I compare with United States and Turkey, I don't think Turkey is closer to Russia than United States. For Russia and Turkey fighting against ISIS, there are disagreements too. PYD has an office in Moscow. It's worse than United States strategy right now, and Turkey has disagreements on PYD with Russia too. So I can say on a more trade level, they are good friends, but on the army side, I don't think there will be a cooperation that US and Turkey is seeking right now.
And Aykan, if we look at the bigger picture here on these visits that are being taken by President Erdogan, this is a world tour, stops in Russia, China, India, the United States, and NATO as well. Do you see a big strategic vision here, some kind of big plan behind these visits? What's the president trying to achieve?
I think at the strategic level, this is mostly about hedging. Turkey is looking for alternatives because its traditional pro-transatlantic orientation doesn't seem to be compatible
options,
with
as yes. Joshua pointed
out. Yes. Yeah? So Turkey's traditional transatlantic orientation no longer appears to be compatible with President Erdogan's kind of personal zeal and project. So that I would see as the long-term strategic vision here. But beyond that, I think ultimately the short-term question is this. Economically, Turkey is really feeling the pinch. The interest rates are high. The inflation is at an all-time high within the last decade. The economy is slowing down. There's 25% youth unemployment. So Turkey desperately needs new markets, new investors. Turkey needs new tourists because Turkey lost over $10 billion in revenue following various security crises in the country. So I think that the immediate goal could be more economic than political. And Turkey, especially Erdogan in the run-up to the 2019 presidential elections, need new injections of cash, foreign currency, and direct investment.
Right, and Ali, if we look at that, Erdogan was recently in China for the Belt and Road Forum there in Beijing. What do you see as the major benefits for Turkey as it engages more with this huge economic initiative put in place by China?
Turkey is looking more partnership right now from Asia to Europe. As Mr. Erdemir said, I mean, Turkey needs to get more investors, more tourists, more partnership. So it's a critical step that he went to China and met his counterpart. So I think it's a strategic movement from the Turkish side, and we'll see more visits in upcoming months from President Erdogan. And I believe that this kind of visits will be very productive for Turkey and potential partners globally.
And Joshua, how do you think all this is being seen inside Turkey?
You know, I think from a Turkish point of view, the problem is the way things are seen in Turkey are very much controlled by the media, which is very much dominated by the government. And so, given what's been going on in terms of China, they're not focusing on the Uyghur issue or other sensitive issues, even though that's always been the kind of the impediment towards better Turkish-Chinese relations. I think as Erdogan and as the Turkish government looks for options, it tamps down those differences and says, look, here are these alternatives. Look, you don't need to always look at the West. If the West is criticizing us, who cares about the West? You know, with what happened with Holland and Germany and the elections in Europe, Turkey is going to continue to, from a nationalistic point of view, figure out where it can find these new partners around the world. And I think the regular average Turkish man on the street has much more kind of positive views about Asia as being very pragmatic, and it looks to the West and America in particular as being very unfair. And so clearly this anti-Americanism, this anti-Western feeling that is pretty foreign to Turkey in many ways, that the government used to be combating because it would hurt their relations in a global sense, are now being fanned. And the flames of this anti-Westernism, I think, are very dangerous because they will envelop the rest of Turkey. And given that Turkey's economy is so dependent on the West, this is not a formula for success.
Aykan, the one country that we have not talked about that President Erdogan visited was India. How important is that relationship for Turkey?
Turkey's relations with India have been hampered by Turkey's close relations with Pakistan. And I think President Erdogan now has strong pragmatic incentives to balance that because India is a rising power. Turkey needs investment. Turkey needs technology transfer. Turkey needs new export markets. Turkey needs more tourists. So I think what we're seeing here is the economy is trumping ideology. The economy is, in a way, coming over Islamist ideology. And I think real economics is always a good antidote to ideology. So I think it's a positive development.
But does that make Turkey susceptible to international pressure? If you say economics is trumping ideology, could the international community pressure Turkey to change internally, domestically?
Now, the answer is yes, but exactly for that reason, Erdogan is trying to steer Turkish economy away from the US and the EU to the East, because there the economic incentives and disincentives have less to do with democracy. You know, with India, if Erdogan kind of tones down Turkish-Pakistani relations, with India, things could really go up.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it, gentlemen. Thanks to all of you for joining us.